You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. This is a special guest. I say special because he has the same name as me. It's Robbie Jenkins.
Yes.
Dude,
We have the best name ever.
We do. And we prefer Robbie rather than Robert because it makes us both feel like we're getting yelled at.
Yes, exactly. That was always the full name every time.
I've only had one person in my life I've encountered with the same name, and it was an Indian girl that sat beside me in one of my classes. And they ended up having to move us because we're sitting side by side, and all I hear is Robbie, and I look up, I'm like, here, and she said here at the same time. And I looked over at her, I was like, how do you spell yours? And she goes, oh, I spell mine with an A. She spells it R-A-B-I.
Oh crap. That's crazy.
You spell yours R-O-B-Y. I spell mine R-O-B-B-I-E.
Yeah, we're just trying to figure out every single way that you can spell the name Robbie.
I just want to be different.
Mine actually comes from we had family friends and their last name was Roby, and they watched me a lot as a kid, so I just kind of adopted the way they spelled their last name as how I spelled Robbie.
Did you get the Twitter yet? Did you get the Twitter handle?
I have Oh Dang It's Robbie for my Twitter handle, yeah.
I couldn't do shit for my Twitter handle because there's a famous guitar player named Robbie Robertson. He's like 60 years old. He hasn't made music in like 20-something years, but he tweets every 10 minutes.
Dude, that's not, I don't even mess with Twitter that much because I do so much stuff on Instagram and then all the schooling stuff. Twitter's too much for me too.
I stay off of it too. I'd be tweeting some dumb shit. Trust me.
Yep, exactly. That's exactly what I used to do when I was on it. Just nothing productive at all.
So Robbie, tell me a little bit about yourself and what do you do professionally?
So right now I'm a student full-time at UCSC studying chemistry. I'm about a year away from my bachelor's. I also work at the school as well. I grade for organic chemistry. I tutor on the side, and then I also do maintenance on the autoclaves for the whole school. So I like clean them and make sure everything's working on them and stuff.
When it comes to chemistry, though, what exactly are you studying? Because my information on chemistry is that every single class that was a chemistry class was fun as shit because on the first day you got to blow something up.
Oh yeah, we don't get to blow anything up. If you blow something up, something went wrong. I'm into organic synthesis, but the bachelor's degree that I'm going for is just general chemistry. You kind of have to take everything. You have to take all your physical chemistries, all of my organic chemistries. I took chemical oceanography too. I really enjoyed that class. But I'm leaning towards, after finishing my bachelor's, trying to get a job in total synthesis.
What exactly does that mean, though? You said organic chemistry. First thing that comes into my mind is we hear Barry White or somebody or Barry Manilow on the thing going, "Oh baby."
when you're talking about organic chemistry, I prefer like the synthesis type stuff. So you'd be just making things, but mainly you're focused on like new carbon bonds and things of that sort. Whereas like inorganic, you're dealing with metals and non-metals reacting with each other a lot of the time, or what's called coordination compounds and stuff like that.
How difficult is it for you to understand chemistry in the first place? I mean, when I look at a periodic table, I start immediately thinking Breaking Bad, and I only know the first two. You know, everything else starts to go into the borons, the chemical hedrons, the hydroxydrons. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
It's really interesting how I even got into chemistry, because I was working, I was doing like painting and stuff like that. And my ex was going to school and I was just like, I'm wasting potential. Like I want to go back to school and get a job that I enjoy. And the first class that I found at my community college that fit my schedule was a chemistry class. And I took it and I just fell in love with it. Like I understood it, as much as you can at that level. And then I actually ended up getting a job the next semester, kind of doing what's called SI, so supplemental instruction for that exact chemistry class. So I was teaching other students while I was taking the higher chemistry courses.
Now, do you think your fascination just with randomly loving it when you started doing it was also because like you went from painting to this, and that's it for a lot of people, you saying that's going to be a large leap. Like, how do you go from painting to working with chemicals? But when you start kind of looking down at the chemical compounds and what we picture them as, like in our textbooks, and also with a microscope, what we can analyze under them, it is a form of art. I mean, a lot of that stuff is pretty, like a lot of paintings I see today have that same color variation. A lot of people that paint, a painting that could be maybe cells or something scientific. It shows that in a microscope as well when you look under it.
Oh, absolutely. Like if you look at some of my Instagram posts, there is a ton of stuff I got to do on my last day at that lab at my previous community college. And he was just letting me play with stuff under a microscope and make videos of it and stuff like that. But when I said I was doing painting, I was doing like house painting, like um commercial painting, house painting, like all that kind of stuff.
Oh, so you
I
were
did-
you were working with paint thinner and all that shit, and you're like,
Yeah, yeah.
pass out. Maybe I should learn to figure out what these compounds are.
Well, we always did like our dumb shit with the fireworks when we were younger, like how you take the Piccolo Petes and you smash them up after you wrap them in duct tape and they're bombs now, like all that kind of stuff. We were always doing that.
Definitely
So
didn't know that one. I remember Roman candles, shooting them at each other, trying to go for the person's eyes. And then I remember M80s, and I remember I almost blew my hand off one time when I tried to shove it in a mailbox.
yeah, we used to take the M80s and see how high we can like make stuff vertically lift. Me and my brother used to do that all the time when we were younger. We were crazy.
So, with learning more about chemicals and just chemistry in general, if you're trying to explain it to anybody, how would you explain chemistry?
I would explain chemistry as making stuff really. Like you're trying to figure out what the stuff around you is made of. You're trying to make new versions of that stuff. Well, that's going more into like the synthetic chemistry, the part that I like. But like chemistry in general, it's just it's amazing. It's so hard to explain, like to break it down, but you're just looking at what everything is made of and trying to manipulate it basically.
With understanding more about chemistry in general, do you start looking at just everyday objects and start analyzing the chemical compound behind it?
Oh, absolutely. I'll look at like somebody will be eating something and I'll go, oh wow, they use EDTA in this to as a preservative. That's an interesting choice. Or oh, they don't need preservatives because it's full of sodium chloride. It's full of salt. So that's probably why there's no other preservatives in here. And I go a little nuts about like the whole health craze stuff, how everybody's like sitting there and they're talking about um, oh yeah, this doesn't have any of those hard to pronounce chemicals, but then like it's loaded with other crap that's just easier to pronounce.
I feel like if you become a chemist, you basically have to register that on your license, just like if a person who's a boxer has to register their hands as deadly weapons. Only because,
Right.
like, how easy is it for you now, just that you have the information on knowing what chemicals react to each other to a point where you could make a bomb?
Oh, it's simple. You learn how you if you're paying attention, you learn that in like your first or second semester. But you have to be paying attention. Like they don't just say, "Hey, this is how you make a bomb."
I'm slightly hinting, but also not trying to incriminate myself on wondering how do you make a very simple bomb if I was going to throw something at my neighbor?
If you're gonna throw something at your neighbor, well, I mean, it depends on how simple you want to go. You just want to scare them. You can just put some dry ice in a bottle, chuck it over. Let that kind of explode on its own.
Good old
Um,
chlorine bombs. I remember doing
oh,
that.
oh God, those are scary. um, there's so many ways to go. There's the ones that people use in car bombs and stuff like that with ammonium nitrate. Like it really depends on which way you're trying to go. So it's there's a vast array of ways to do it.
Now, I feel like when it comes to just a chemical reaction, what is the most common chemical reactions? I feel like it comes when an acid touches a base or something of a less acidity.
Yeah, double replacement reactions are like very common, especially when you're talking about like inorganic stuff. Um, those are the ones you mess around with the most when you're in your first labs and stuff like that, like mixing hydrochloric. Oh wait, this would be a single replacement, but like hydrochloric acid with zinc, you're going to end up losing your hydrogen and making zinc chloride. And that's just basically dissolving a metal inside an acid. But you have like double replacements, like trying to think of one. Well, acid bases are like the most common ones. So like hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide. Mix those together, you'll get water, some heat, and you'll get sodium chloride. So you'll have a solution of salt water, essentially.
See, what always fascinated me about chemistry, where I started really getting interested into it, not just when Breaking Bad finally came on Netflix, but was when I was a kid and I jumped into a pool and I opened up my eyes underwater. And after like a full day of swimming in the water, I got back to my hotel room that we were staying at, and my eyes burned so bad I had to lay down and I couldn't look at any light because it was hurting my eyes so bad. The chemical that was
Yeah.
in the water had literally like purified all the healthy bacteria that was in my eyes, and literally just it was the most painful night I've ever had in my entire life, probably.
Yes. Yeah. That stuff is insane. Like that pools just honestly scare the crap out of me sometimes, especially when they're larger pools. We just had the pool over at my old CC. I think my last semester there, they hadn't been properly storing some of the chemicals, and they actually exploded. Yeah. I just remember going there for like my basketball class that I had at a god awful time of 6 in the morning, and everything was roped off, and I was like, did we get it canceled? Like what's going on? They're like, oh yeah, no, the pool chemicals blew up. I'm like, don't say that casually. Like
See, that reminds me of a thing that happened, I think it was a few years back, but you know that embalming fluid that they put in dead bodies to kind of keep them preserved and looking lively before they bury them?
like formaldehyde or
Yeah, like that
yeah.
embalming fluid stuff. Well, when they used to do this thing back in the day where they would, when they sold a coffin, it's going to be airtight, it's going to be sealed. No air is going to be able to escape your body. The body's going to be perfectly preserved. And what happened was they would put they would take the air out of these coffins, like airlock it, those airtight ones, and they had the embalming fluid that was in the body, and they would bury this thing under the ground. And what happened was a bunch of people thought people were robbing graves when really it was the embalming fluid that was exploding under the ground and causing this to happen.
Yeah, that's crazy. That is nuts.
See, what's so fascinating is nobody really looks at that when everything that is an object today is made up of cells and made up of so many different chemicals literally working together. And that's when I asked you, I was like, when you start understanding all this information, you start looking at things differently. You know, you probably, when you see a pool, you're like, that's filled with this much percentage of, like, you probably dip your finger into like, there's a high level of chlorine in this mixed with a little, and then name another chemical. But like, it's so fascinating because nobody ever really looks at that. When there was a big thing back in the day, I don't even know if you remember, but where people were like, don't drink like Windex or anything like that, or bleach or something, because that can kill you. And then it was like a big thing. They had to watch it. And then eventually kids started eating Tide Pods and they had to lock those down too. I couldn't do laundry for fucking weeks.
Yeah, no, they have it locked down in the stores still. Like there's little and the stores around where I live, they have to like lift doors to get your Tide Pods and stuff on some of the stores.
With bleach, like if that stuff even touches your skin, it stains your skin. Why are we using that? Is it just because it's an effective acid or chemical compound to be able to get up dirt stains? But I feel like it's very dangerous to just our like chemical or molecular compound as well.
Yeah, it's either calcium or sodium hypochlorite depending on the bleach, and that stuff is really really crazy. If you take like that and mix it with a little bit of brake fluid, it'll like spontaneously combust. like with a very hot fire. But I was listening to Ologies, and she went to the Clorox, like their lab, and ended up like talking to this guy who is like one of the bleach experts. And it's just because that from what I remember, it's just because like that is such an effective chemical at killing like bacteria and stuff like that and removing stains. It's a crazy chemical though. It's a very strong oxidizer.
When we say synthesis, you mentioned that before, that you were really interested into that. A lot of people are going to start immediately thinking plants. Now, are you talking about a different form of synthesis, right?
Yeah, like basically you take one thing that you start with your reagent, and you run it through steps to get your desired product. That would be a synthesis. Like you can have one step synthesis where you just treat something um with hydrogen and a Lindlar catalyst to turn an alkene into an alkane, or an alkyne,
Now, how
or an
often,
alkyne to alkene. My bad, I had that backwards.
now, how often when you're working in the chemistry lab, do you ever try and make up your own chemical compound? I feel like that would be the first thing. I'd be trying to create something new by adding a bunch of shit that probably shouldn't go together.
Back in the day, that's all I used to do. Like in the Gen Chem labs and the first OChem lab, stuff like that. That's when I used to do that a lot. But as you learn more about the stuff, you start to learn like maybe you shouldn't mix random things together and try to do new stuff. And there's some labs that actually like give you freedom to kind of try to design your own synthetic route to make stuff, and it's really neat.
Do you ever try doing your own research, or just using the research or information that you've learned from your class or something to try and do an experiment at home?
Absolutely. The very first time I decided that I was gonna do that, and I started buying like glassware and things like that, I wanted to make a present for a friend. They were getting married.
And you blew their
Amber and
face off.
no, no, no. What I wanted to do is I wanted to silver plate this little thing that I had made out of copper wiring that had their two initials, but it was like combined into one. It was an A and an S. And I wanted to silver plate it, but I didn't just want to buy a silver plating solution. I wanted to make my own silver plating solution, and I wanted to do the electrochemistry myself. Like I wanted to be the one that did everything. Um,
How did you create a solution though? Like, did you just mix a bunch of chemicals together? Like, I'm trying to understand that process of it. Like, did you pour two things in a bowl and then spin it around like you're making a souffle? Or
the first thing I had to do was I didn't have access to a fume. They don't let you do at my community college. They don't let you use the fume hoods for anything other than designed experiments. So I had to research how to build a fume hood safely. And when I did that, I think it took me 9 months, start to finish, to build my fume hood. But I had to teach myself some coding for the gas sensors I was going to use, and the LED lighting and stuff like that. Had to research like sparkless fans, what kind of filters I'm actually going to need that are going to work. Um, and I built this really nice fume hood, and then I started like slowly buying equipment. Like I bought a hot and stir plate combo. That was like the most expensive thing I've ever bought. It was
the
like
good
four
old
hundred
Bunsen
dollars.
burner?
Yeah, I wish I could have just used a Bunsen burner for it.
Dude, I got in so much trouble in class for using a Bunsen burner to cook one of those sausage on a stick, the pancake sticks. Dude, I got in
I could
so
just
much.
imagine. I could just imagine somebody doing that.
Dude, I had to write a punishment paragraph in chemistry class because of I was chewing gum.
Mm, yes.
That is a big thing. They talk about the chemical things that can leak into your cheek cells. I had to write it over and over again. I can memorize it. It says,
Yeah.
I will not chew gum in class because of the chemicals that we are working around can be soaked up into our cheek cells, causing exposure. And it just went on. And I was like,
Yep.
I gave it to her and I was like, thanks for that. And she goes, go sit down. I was like, okay. First of all, you can't have a name like Miss Hancock and then make fun of me. Okay.
Right.
I'm addressing that.
Yeah. Right. Especially you're like, dude, I was just chewing gum. Like. God, it does make sense. They're right with it. It's just like they're making it seem like some of the chemicals that they're actually working with are a little worse than they are. Not to shun the lab safety stuff, but they would lose their shit sometimes
Well, she
when
was
you're
chewing a
like
lot
talking
of
about.
big league chews. So I mean, while she was giving me this, which was really,
Oh my God, are you serious?
I was like, we're not even working with chemicals today. We did it once at the beginning of the year, and we haven't done shit since.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a possibility you contaminate things, but like in all honesty, most of the stuff that people usually work with in lower level chem labs isn't that bad.
What's the most harmful chemicals that you've learned that really can hurt a person? Not like I'm gonna go throw anything at my neighbor, but I'm trying to think because I know like a lot of stuff that's very acidic is very, very rough on our skin. I know peroxide helps clean out wounds, but that shit hurts.
Yeah. So that actually can go back to the my first like thing that I did outside of the lab. Once I built that fume hood, I had to make so basically in order to make my plating solution, I needed silver nitrate. To make silver nitrate, you can dissolve silver, like a silver bar, inside of nitric acid, and then you can precipitate your crystals out of that solution. So I you can't really get nitric acid around here in a high enough concentration, like as a consumer. So I had to make my own. And if you to make it, you take hydrochloric or sulfuric acid, and I used ammonium nitrate. And you basically you mix them together, heat it up, and you distill over your basically it's like it's red fuming nitric acid is what it's called. It's like when you open the bottle for it, like fumes just start coming out of it. This stuff is like seriously the scariest stuff I've ever worked with. Like I still know people that haven't used red fuming nitric acid before because it's crazy stuff. You can't wear you have to wear special gloves when you use it, or you have to wear no gloves at all. Because if you wear your standard lab gloves, they like if it gets on there, it'll catch on fire.
Why is that? Why does it do that?
It's just an extremely it's an extremely exothermic reaction, and from what I remember, right, the nitrile in it is what is being reacted with, and when you have nitric acid, that's a really strong oxidizer. So it just like it immediately like it takes a couple seconds. But if you check out like Nile Red on YouTube, he has a video where he like shows you what happens when you squirt it on the gloves, and they just catch on fire. It's crazy.
Have you ever heard of the Cecil Kelly incident?
No, no, I have not.
Dude, you got to look this thing up. So there was this incident that happened. It was a guy that was working at one of those like power plants, like that. What they were like, I don't remember if it was exactly nuclear, but it was like a radiation factory.
Okay.
You got to look up the. It's been a long time since I looked this up. But Cecil Kelly, there was like they had these giant vats, like the giant distill things you would make beer out of, like, but they were making chemicals in there, and he was supposed to check it. And what happened was it started overheating, and he tried to cool it down by himself. Everybody else evacuated, and it exploded. And the way it exploded, it funneled all of it into him, like all the
Oh my
radiation,
God.
all the shit into him. And it's a pot. Like I mean, you can look this up, and you get to see like his actual corpse and everything. He literally, the story goes, he went outside, started screaming in the middle of snow. It's like 20-degree weather. Started screaming that he was on fire. He started taking off his clothes and passed out in the snow. The ambulances came, everybody picked him up, they took him to the hospital. He died, I think, 32 hours later of radiation poisoning.
That yeah, that's nuts, dude.
He would not have lived that long. The only reason he lived that long was they kept giving him IV and blood transfusions, but all the blood they were taking out of his body was black. It was goo. It was
dude,
not.
that's
So all the blood they were putting back in, his body was still so toxic that it was just blackening it again. It was poisoning in it. He went through literally what you would call like severe radiation poisoning that would take maybe an average of like a week or so to kill somebody. He did that in 32 hours, and they kept him alive that long. They checked his bone tissue, they checked everything, and his bone tissue was ash. There was so much stuff where they couldn't even believe. Like towards the end, he was like, "Just kill me." Like this is like they couldn't like they were trying to keep him alive only for research purposes. They weren't actually trying to save his
Yeah.
life. They were just trying to see, this has never happened before. Let's try and get as much information as we possibly can and see what we can do to try and fix this.
That's right. I didn't know by name. I remember hearing something about a guy being kept alive after being exposed to radiation, and they were just keeping him alive to figure out like how this fucks us up,
Like
basically.
when you start figuring out that shit, that'll make you analyze anything that you're pouring on your floor to clean up some like dirt or something. Holy shit. Like I started looking at all these chemicals and stuff in the store. I'm like, how did they get this in the correct formula to be able to do what this thing does without harming us?
um, have you not to switch on you, but have you heard about the guy that built a nuclear reactor like in his backyard? He was a Boy Scout.
Of course. Of
That
course.
of course it was a Boy
That
Scout,
son
right?
of a bitch was going for his badge, wasn't he?
Probably. No, there was this they have many people have done really good stories. His name is David Hahn. Um he's called the Radioactive Boy Scout, and he was attempting to build a neutron source at the age of 17 out of his shed or some crap like that. But it's crazy. You look at him now, he's wrecked. I don't know if he's like still alive now, but when you look up pictures, oh no, he's dead. I
What
just found the
happened?
Wikipedia. Um,
Did he just poison himself around being around that much radiation or around that much
yeah,
power in general?
it was the radiation. He was taking, because I don't know if you know, our smoke detectors actually have, I want to say, americium in them. And they work by sending, if I could be off, but I think they send a beta particles or alpha particles they decay at a steady rate. And when it stops hitting the detector because the smoke is too thick, that's what sets it off. What sets off the smoke detectors.
See, where your fascination with chemicals comes from just putting stuff to kind of together and watching the synthesis of the two. Mine comes from like the dumb stuff, like taking a shot of vinegar and wondering why it makes me feel like I'm gonna throw up afterwards.
Oh yeah, I can't help with that one. I just know that's disgusting. You should probably never do
I had no
that.
idea about it. I remember I was eating Thrasher's French fries, and you have to dump vinegar on it. It's like if you're eating seafood, you gotta have some vinegar. So I'm from a big seafood area, so this was like, oh, Thrasher's French fries. Let's try some vinegar on there, and I dump a whole bunch of on there, and then the rest of it's soaking at the bottom. And my brother's like, I dare
Ugh.
you to drink that, and I was like, oh,
Oh
you
God,
dare
no.
me? I'll do it for free. And then I just drink it, and the next thing I know, I'm like, my stomach lining really hurts inside. And I was like, what chemical compounds in a food where a very small amount is okay, but in a little bit more of a larger amount, it can be very, very painful for a person to go through.
Yeah, vinegar is just acetic acid. It's just a really dilute solution of it. So basically you drank a really dilute acid, and then your stomach's already acidic as it is. So I'm assuming that could be why your stomach hurt, possibly.
Ruining the inside of my intestines for sure. When it comes to like
That's
the acid and
yeah.
the acid and base scale, like the pH scale. What makes things so acidic though? Is that just what the reactant is? It's just very, very like I guess hyperactive compared to a base where it might be a little bit more slowed down.
So there you can imagine acids are something that are willing to donate a proton. They'll donate a hydrogen. That's I believe that is the Arrhenius definition. I could be wrong. But it's a proton donor is what an acid is. So they'll have a hydrogen that they're perfectly happy with getting rid of. And a base is something that is perfectly happy accepting the proton. So like if you look at hydrochloric acid and sodium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid is HCl. If it takes the one of the electrons that are being shared between the hydrogen and the chlorine and gives it to the chlorine becomes stable. It'll have a full octet. It'll have a negative charge, but it'll be just like a noble gas. And then you take something like sodium hydroxide, and if the hydroxide will have a negative charge on it, and your sodium will have a positive charge. So what can happen is that hydrogen that was kicked off of the hydrochloric acid will go and basically attach to the hydroxide, making a water molecule, H2O. And then you'll have these positively charged sodium ions floating around, and these negatively charged chlorine ions floating around
Now,
in a solution.
you talked about with like all the information you've learned from chemistry and like where you're fascinated with organic synthesis of using that form of chemistry. Where do you plan on going with that?
Honestly, probably just into research. That would be like pretty much the dream, because I don't want to be just doing the same thing over and over again. I'm pretty sure that's why I got tired of construction. That's why I got tired of painting. Like, well, it wasn't mentally challenging to me, and it was just repetition, so much repetition. And when you're doing research, you're gonna have a lot of repetition, but you're working towards something, and like it could be something brand new that nobody knows anything about. You could be just learning like deeper and deeper things about stuff that we thought we knew everything about. Like that, I just love the research field like so much.
Organic synthesis, that's like kind of concerned of what really kind of constructs organic compounds, right?
Yeah. Basically, whenever we're talking about organic stuff, we're mainly talking about like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and then of course hydrogen. You usually aren't too concerned with anything other than that and your halides, so like fluorine, chlorine, bromine, and iodine. Those are basically, that's the only part of the periodic table that we really care all that much about when you're talking about organic stuff. We do a lot of chemistry like with like boron and stuff like that too, but our main compounds pretty much consist of just like carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, like the main stuff that we mess with.
I mean, it requires an exuberant amount of time to be able to kind of, first of all, narrow down any certain chemical as well. Like you're adding all these different things, really throwing a bunch of stuff together in a pot using your information that you've noticed on how they react to each other. I mean, how often do you come across something that is a new chemical compound or something? It seems like it takes a lot of trial and error.
Oh, absolutely. When you're doing this stuff, not only like you can make something, and it's harder to figure out what it was that you made and be able to completely isolate what you were making as well. Like, you could go and throw a bunch of organic acids and they're like Lewis acids and bases together inside of a reaction and do like all these reductions and stuff, and then you could get this product that's giving you this really interesting NMR spectra. But if you can't isolate that product, it's kind of useless.
Yeah, it's like
For
doing that's why whenever you see a scientific experiment or something, they have a bunch of like it worked 73 times out of the 100 trials we did. You have to make sure there's a more of an amount that you're able to replicate it. I mean, anybody can just dump in a bunch of chemicals and then get something like once, but then trying to narrow down exactly what percentage or numbers. That's why you guys are constantly, as scientists or just chemists in generals, you're writing down the exact number of what chemical I'm putting in here, so you can make sure you can refer back to it later if it works.
Yeah, exactly. And you're sitting there and you're tweaking like, okay, I mixed these two syringes of the things into my round bottom flask at the same exact time, and for some reason that worked a lot better than doing one and then doing the other. We don't know why. Let's figure it out. Like, why is squirting them in at the same time way better? That's actually something that came across one of the graduate students that I was talking to. He said the only way he got high yields when he was making his porphyrins were to take both of the syringes at the same time and push them all in rapidly at the same exact time. If he did one then the other, his yields would be like 10% as opposed to the 40 to 60% he was getting.
I'm guessing that's because if you're having them both injected at the same time, they don't have enough time to sit and kind of get used to the environment that they're being put in.
Yeah, he still hasn't told me why. I was like, well, why is that? He's like, I honestly have no idea.
Now, what's one really dangerous thing that you've experienced working with chemicals or just these compounds in general?
Most of the stuff, because when you start working with with these chemicals, well, you should already know pretty much everything about the chemical you're messing with before
Yeah,
you
I mean,
start touching it.
most, not to sound like an idiot, but most people like me, I like to sniff something before I see what it is. And I was in a chemical class, a chemistry class, and I sniffed a chemical and almost passed out.
Yeah, that's a problem.
My brain cells felt like they were dying. It's like all those kids back in the day used to sniff those flavored Sharpies or whatever. Like, this one smells like oranges, and now I don't know math.
Yeah, we had these ethers that we would use to pull out stuff because it's a really good solvent. But holy hell, like you stepped out of the fume hood for even a second with any of that in your glassware, and you could smell it on the other side of the room. It was just so strong. But when you're working with this stuff, you usually know, you should know. I can't even guarantee I've known everything about them, but you should know the dangers of doing, like, messing with this stuff before. So most of the dangerous stuff that's happened has been from people being underprepared.
Or just we call those daredevils or adventurers that just really want to freak everybody out.
Oh, I got a really close experience with one of those adventures, as you call them.
Is that the type of person you want in a room though that does that type of stuff? I feel like they're the ones
No,
that are gonna.
absolutely not.
Yeah, but how you can't be safe 100%. Come on, even in Breaking Bad, you got to learn how to cook up crystal meth every once in a while.
Yeah, no, you can do it, just not next to me.
Okay.
Because that's actually what happened. I finished my lab early. It was this lab called the copper cycle, where you start out with copper, you run it through all these reactions, and you get copper at the very end. But you have like solutions in between and stuff. It's a really interesting thing, and you try to maximize the amount of product or of copper you have at the end to match the amount that you originally had put in. It's great. It's a great experiment. But there's one step at my CC where you would normally just use stir bars for this, but the stir bars were for the organic chemistry classroom. Like, Gen Chem was like, you can just mix it with a glass stir rod. Well, there's one step when you're heating up the solution. If you're not stirring it, it can overheat and it can just have a runaway reaction and like explode out of your test tube, basically. And I just finished. I just taken off my glasses, locked my locker, and I got to the door on my way out, and I heard a huge boom. And it was the girl that was right next to me. She was not stirring it at all the whole time and had hers turned all the way up her hot plate. And it exploded and it shot onto the roof. It shot a spray pattern where like you could see like the cone behind her, basically, like where she was standing, and completely covered my area too. And I was like, I am so glad I finished early today. Like, I didn't stop to go pee or anything, because I would have been covered in it. Like, because we didn't have to wear aprons, we only wore goggles.
And she was okay.
She was fine. She was one of the people that knew she didn't know how to chemistry, so she was wearing an apron that day, actually.
I don't know how to chemistry.
Give me an apron. I can't chemistry.
I'm pretty sure there's probably a book out there for that, Chemistry for Dummies or something.
Yeah. Oh, I've had some interesting people.
I've had a close encounter. We did so my 7th grade teacher was Mr. Hancock. The one that made me write the paper was his wife, Mrs. Hancock. Yes, I know. Yeah, I got hit from both sides. It was pretty.
Just surrounded by Hancocks.
I pissed that teacher off. Yeah, the God. That sounds like a porn if I've ever heard one.
Yep.
I literally was like, I pissed him off and I was like, well, I don't have to deal with you next year. The next year, he's like, oh yeah, I put you in my wife's class. I'm like, damn.
You're like, well, fuck.
7th grade, we watched those Tim and Moby videos trying to understand like all about the stuff about chemicals and compounds in a really dumb, lazy teacher way, you know? And
Yeah.
so once those videos were finished, we spent all this time learning all the steps, the processes. I mean, weeks and weeks of just preparation before we were going to conduct the experiment. So we go and conduct this experiment. It's going pretty well. I forgot there are a lot of pipettes and all those types of things. I forgot what chemicals we're using. I think we're using bleach and some other compound that can cause an explosive reaction. But
Okay.
it's really shit you just don't want to get into your eyes.
Yeah. So
And
like everything.
yeah, basically everything. And first, as soon as we walk in the room, 100% safety goggles. You know it. You got them registered to you. Put them on your head. And there was this one kid, what didn't work in my group, but worked in the group beside of me, and he was sweating so bad. He was known to be a sweaty guy. So he takes off his eyeglasses, whatever you want to call them, safety goggles, takes them off, starts wiping his eyes. He
Oh
doesn't
God.
understand his hands. He's been working with chemicals the whole time.
Yep.
Immediately starts screaming, like puts his goggles back on and just starts screaming on top of his lungs. So what happened was when you put those giant safety goggles on, they can suction cup to your face,
Yep.
trapping
I
air and all
remember.
that stuff in there. So we did
Yeah.
that, and it trapped the air so perfectly that it got the chemical just so like I guess more magnified where his eyes were. Started bloody murder, dude. He thought someone was getting murdered in our classroom. The next thing I know, teacher runs over, takes his eye goggles off, runs them over to the eye wash. First time I ever saw that thing get used.
Oh
Flushes out
God.
his eyes, dude. He had to go home. Dude, he couldn't open up his eye for a week after that.
Dude, that
He had to go to the
I shouldn't be
hospital.
laughing. I shouldn't be laughing, but
Whew, good God, dude.
oh,
There were so many things that happened at that point. We found out a girl in my class was colorblind that she didn't know, and we were like 15 years old. She went 15 years without knowing she was colorblind.
I've had people in chem labs multiple times in ones that I was in, like as a student, and then when I was working in the stockroom and when I was doing my SI for things, I had students find like 4 or 5 students find out they were colorblind. And this is in community college. Like they learn because they're like, I don't see any color change. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and that's what makes it difficult to be a scientist. You're like, oh, you don't see the colors. How are you going to know to grab the purple thing instead of the blue thing? You're like, I
Yeah,
don't know. All
exactly.
I'm seeing is shades of grays. Damn it.
Or what if you had a chemical reaction that was literally just letting off some color and you couldn't tell because you can't see the color, and you think it's a failed reaction? Like,
Well, this was what stuck out in my head was that like why I remember it so fondly was I got put out of class that day early because my dad had his gallbladder taken out, and so they picked me up from school like, don't freak out, but your dad's in the hospital. I'm like, well, how the hell? What
get
happened? And so right before I left, it turns out to be the fun day at class. We just start sitting around in a circle and we're throwing a ball back and forth, but we have to name a chemical compound. So it's like kind of study research, I guess, but it's more like
yeah,
here, before you catch the ball, name that chemical compound. Then you have to say it, all the information you soaked in before the test or something. And it was around Halloween time. And the girl was like, he was like Mr. Hancock, yeah, him again. He threw the ball at her and said, "Catch the orange ball." And also, said something, some science question. She's like, "What do you mean orange ball?" And then everyone just stopped and looked at her like, "What?"
oh shit.
And she goes, "What do you mean orange ball?" He goes, "That's an orange ball you're holding in your hand." She's like, "It's a gray ball." And he goes, "No, that's an orange ball." And then immediately grabs another thing that's orange and sticks it in front of her face. He goes, "What color is this?" She goes, "It's gray." He goes, "This is orange." Grabs another thing. And then eventually, like after like 5 minutes of this, we start figuring out she's colorblind. So he's like, "What do you expect people are putting on their front porch right now? They're putting out pumpkins. What do you think those colored pumpkins are?" He goes, "They're gray." "No, they're orange." And it was like a earth shattering moment where my dad getting gallbladder taken out, whatever, didn't mean shit compared to that. Because as soon as I got to the hospital, I jumped on his bed, which is not what you're supposed to do if someone's getting surgery on their stomach. And I jumped on there. I was like, "Guess what I learned today?" And he's like, "What? What'd you
Yeah,
learn?"
Like,
was
what
like-
the fuck, kid?
I was like, you might be getting your gallbladder taken out, but today we found out a girl in my class was colorblind. And he was like, wait, so she just thought they were putting like rocks on their front porch? And I was like, yeah, isn't that nuts? And he's like, yeah, it is nuts.
Dude, oh my, could you imagine fucking with somebody though? Like, get a whole group of people, like a whole classroom, and like make them convinced that what they think is purple is actually like white or something.
You've
Like,
been living your whole
that
life
would
a
be,
lie.
yeah. Just make them think that, even though it actually is purple. Just to fuck with them. Just to give them shit.
I had another kid in my class like a few years later in high school that knew he was colorblind, but he was like, I'm wearing this red shirt. I'm like, I thought you said you don't see reds. Yeah, but it's gray, so I know it's either gray or red. So I'm just gonna say it's red. And I'm like, well, it's red for sure. Like I thought he
Sweet.
was joking, but he legit, like, we were in art class together, which was hilarious because seeing him trying to paint something, he used everything but red.
Well, you know, some people just have their palettes, right?
Exactly. Well, I was like, dude, you're not using red. Like, you know, that's a primary color. And he's like, yeah, but it looks gray to me, so I don't enjoy it, so I'm not going to use it. And I'm like, damn, thank you for
right?
put that in a fortune cookie. Holy shit.
Right? It looks gray to me.
Nice gray shirt. It's red, bro. Okay, sure. Fire's gray too, by the way.
Oh, have you seen that video where I can't remember who it was, like David Dobrik or something. But they convinced that kid that he went invisible for a little while.
There's too much. I can't do that to somebody. You can't. If you did that to me when I was 7 years old, I would have been doing some weird shit.
It was a little kid. And what they had done is they took like a picture next to the chair with his arm around it, that they made the kid sit on to pretend like they were taking the picture, but the chair was empty. So like when they show the picture to the guy that is standing there, you can't see the kid, and the convincing kid's like bawling. It's so fucked. It's such a fucked thing. And then they like bring him back. Like,
Aren't people just amazing?
it was funny, but God, that poor fucking kid, dude. He's never gonna be like able to go to a magic show for the rest of his life. It's gonna be like his PTSD, dude.
I have a fear for things like this, like the way people act when it comes to the art of just teaching chemistry and biology in school in general. Like, experiments aren't going to happen that much anymore because of how dangerous kids can be nowadays. I mean, back in the day, you definitely didn't want to leave me around a Bunsen burner. Like, I was like trying to like just light shit on fire the whole time. You know, I remember we cooked s'mores one time, which was pretty awesome. But the fact I can't cook a pancake on a stick just seems like, you know, it's a little bit ridiculous. But
You're like, what the fuck, man?
we don't have microwaves in our lunchroom. I'm trying to eat this later today.
Yeah, I'm hungry. You have fire, and I'm hungry.
She used to bring spaghetti all the time. I guarantee you she probably heated up one of those things on a Bunsen burner.
Could you
Hypocrite.
imagine coming in and seeing your teacher doing that?
She's
You're
like, yeah,
you're
I
like,
could
girl,
do it.
you
but
can't afford
can't."
a microwave or what? Like,
Yeah,
go buy some new hot food. Come on.
Yeah, it's funner that way though if you're using a Bunsen burner shit.
She was doing it just to spite you, too.
I remember there was a giant chemical cabinet in our class, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. And I was like, I wonder what's in there. And then finally we opened it up and it's safety goggles. I'm like, what the fuck?
They don't put that stuff out there for the kids, man.
It's like, you had to lock that up. Like, oh, last thing we want you to do is protect your eyes.
So I'm one of the officers for the chemistry club, and one of the things that we do is we do outreach events for, like, we go to like high schools and stuff like that, and like finding the right experiments besides like the same ones we always do, it's always a challenge because you have to think about the safety, the cost. Is it actually going to teach them anything? Like, there's a lot that goes into those kind of things, and it's just sometimes it's like too much. Like at my old CC, our chem club wanted to make and sell soap, and like we had to sign loads of paperwork to be able to even make it to where we could just make the soap, like not even try to sell it. It was insane because like they don't want people to sue. Oh, this soap is too basic, so
That's another problem with just having a bunch of stuff that is kind of like very, very rare to the average person. Like a bunch of people can just start taking that shit and trying to sell it somewhere. Like, you want to buy some boron?
I remember one of my teachers at my community college was trying to bribe me to give him some carbon disulfide because he had an acetylene tank and he wanted to go blow stuff up. I was like, dude, we don't have that. We don't have that here. They know exactly what we would do if we had that here. We don't have that. But he always just tell me, try to get some carbon disulfide. Please, please.
Yo, try and give me that sulfur compound, bro.
Yeah. It's
I'm
like,
trying
I
to
want to
make
blow
some
stuff up.
Yeah, I'm trying to make some pipe bombs and shit.
Oh, it's really interesting because we were talking and we have a bunch of stuff for thermite. Basically, the only thing that we were missing at the school, I think we have like pounds of, I want to say it's like ferric oxide or ferrous oxide. Either way, I think it's Fe2O3, so it would be ferrous oxide.
I'm gonna start naming my own chemical compounds. This one's dihedra smoke on the water bluon.
Hey, you make something new, you can fucking name it that if you want.
Do it. What's happening if I mix a Tide Pod and an M80 together?
You're gonna have
Death.
explosion clean laundry.
I call it raining death.
Raining death. Probably for the ants, dude.
Yeah.
You're just gonna rain down on them all that Tide Pod goodness.
You better not wear your dress shirt around me, motherfucker. I'll throw this at you.
I'll clean that shit. Right off your body.
Wipe you off the earth. I'll just wipe off that nice dress shirt before your Sunday morning church service.
Oh God.
Well, Robbie, I really appreciate you coming out and doing the podcast, man. It's been awesome talking to you.
Absolutely. Let me know anytime you want to do this. This was a blast. I'm glad you reached out to me.
Yeah, man, I'm glad. Now, what'd you think, though, when I reached out? Were you like, is this guy a bot? Is he trying to sell me sex service? Because I get a lot of that sometimes. First
thing I thought was, all right, this is a spam comment. I'm just going to kind of ignore it. But then I was sitting with one of my really good friends, and I was like, hey, should I check this out? Like, should I go for it? See, worst case scenario, it's a bot, and they just want me to
swipe right,
check out
bitch. Swipe
right.
right.
They're like, go check out the podcast, and then like never actually ask you to be on it. They're like just trying to get views, just trying to make sure everybody listens to the podcast.
Nah, dude, I was like, let's get this kid, yo. He's got something. Everybody's got something. I mean, I'm like, it doesn't take long just to have a conversation for an hour and see where it goes.
Absolutely. Well,
Rob,
I'm not gonna lie, I was nervous though. Like,
yeah, you don't know what you're getting into. You gotta listen to a couple episodes. I tell people you don't have to. I mean, every conversation's uniquely different. I never thought I would talk about using Tide Pods and also M80s together.
And M80s. yeah, exactly.
But I appreciate you doing the podcast, man. And I want to give you here a minute at the end to kind of promote your Instagram page too, so people can see your awesome work with chemicals, man.
Absolutely. It's a mixed Instagram. It's got like my kid and pictures of my school and stuff on there, but I have a lot of stuff like old chemical demonstrations I do, or anytime I'm in lab I'll post stories, but it's at Odang, it's Robbie, and that's spelled Roby.
Yeah, he spells it that way. I spell it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And shout out to that girl named Robbie in India that spells it R.
Yeah. Yeah, she's got the most unique one I've heard so far. I thought mine was pretty unique. Roby. They're like, wait, isn't there two B's? I'm like, no.
That's funny because every time a teacher, before they get my list, I would tell them my name and they would write down Robbie on the paper without knowing how I spelled it. And they would do Robby. I'm like, do I look like Roby? Do I look like and that Tim and Moby shit? Like that makes me think of that. I'm like, I'm not a robot. What are you doing? I'm not a famous guitar player that still tweets today 80,000 times a day.
He's trying to do 1,000 times for every year that he is old.
Oh,
per day. That's why 80,000 tweets a day.
Make a new song and then I'll start following your Twitter.
There you go. That's what he's doing. He's compiling songs.
So wait, it's for everyone out there. It's Odang. It's Robbie. Roby spelled.
Yes, yes, it is. Yeah,
Now,
definitely feel free to have conversations with me anytime.
send him a DM, ask him a bunch of information. He'll teach you how to make a pipe bomb. He'll teach you how to make all these types of stuff. But he's going to delete all the evidence, so none of it gets incriminated onto him.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're just gonna get mirrors of information.
Wrong links.
Yeah,
Well,
Error
thanks,
404s everywhere.
thanks so much, Robbie, for being on the podcast. And stay tuned for our next episode of Out of the Blank.